speak in the name of the living God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. From that gospel reading, even the dust of your town that clings to our feet, we wipe off in protest against you. What a fantastic missionary strategy. Having had 3 children in 17 months, thankfully a very long time ago, meant that when we were on holiday or visiting a strange church, and there are many such, we were like a walking parish audit. It is quite extraordinary when you turn up dressed inappropriately at somebody else's church with 3 small children, just how much you can tell about the ethos of that congregation and its core values. We have a family album of bad and often hilarious experiences. Once, when staying with my oldest friend in northern Germany, we found ourselves being asked to sit in the sacristy throughout the service, listening to the liturgy over a tannoy system and being permitted to receive communion with the priest coming into the sacristy to serve us. I mean, it was extremely ironic that our children were behaving absolutely perfectly for once, but as the average age of the congregation suggested they had never met children in some decades, it wasn't that surprising. Indeed, rather splendidly, a person rushed out after the Mass was over, and my German's useless, but luckily she spoke French, which is equally bad for me, but there we are. And she said, "We're outraged about what happened to you this morning. That should never have happened." Now, and then she said, "But I suppose I've never really seen children in church except in France." And I thought, right, I think you've told your own problem there. I think, we've had the perplexing experience of being shouted out of the great Franciscan sanctuary in Laverna on the Feast of the Assumption simply because I was wearing the wrong clothes. And probably best of all, in the crypt of Canterbury Cathedral, on our way on holiday, the vergers came. You should do this. It's great, this. The vergers came through the crypt, almost in a line, saying, "You've all got to leave. It's about time for evensong." What a great advert, yeah? Oh, yeah, of course, never occurred to them that some people, especially the worst dressed, actually were going to stay, so we didn't, of course. There are many great experiences too. If you've never been to Saint-Gervais in Paris, I cannot recommend it highly enough. And possibly our best experience at the Anglican Cathedral in Portsmouth, again when the children were very little, when even before we'd arrived, we were being greeted on the street by somebody who said, "A very warm welcome to Portsmouth Cathedral. And do you read music? Because you might want the music edition. And do the children want to go to junior church? Or maybe they want to sit with you, actually, during the liturgy." It was beautiful. But alongside that, the stranger who turns up on a Sunday, whatever their motives and intentions, is always a pilgrim who will read from the way they're welcomed and from the warmth of the worship, from the brokenness of our offering, a huge amount of what this community really believes about the nature and purpose of God. Julian of Norwich, in her Showings of Divine Love, speaks beautifully of the homeliness and courtesy that are fundamental characteristics of God, of the homeliness and courtesy. She even refers to the incarnation, the birth of God in Bethlehem, as an act of divine courtesy. There's something very, very beautiful at the heart of that vision, that love responds to love. Jeff and Sheila are old friends of mine. Jeff was one of my associate priests in Harrogate. He retired early as a result of Sheila's near-fatal car accident. They're charismatic evangelicals who speak in tongues and wave their arms in the air during services. They were not a natural fit for Christchurch Harrogate, but they somehow settled there. And after a couple of months, I felt bold enough to say, "It's great having you on board." And Jeff was just beginning to take services at that point, and he'd never worn vestments at all in church. So he said, "There are a few things a bit weird about this place." I said, "Yeah, it's mainstream C of E." I said, "Well, how is it that you came to settle here in a town where, with every possible variety of thriving church?" And they said, "Because on our first Sunday, having gone to 30 other churches over the previous year, somebody said hello to us here." Oh, God. What do we do to people? What wounds do we inflict without even knowing that we've done it? But the welcome spoke of the values of the gospel and of the gospel community. And our reticence is a missionary failure, just as much as... Well, actually, I'm not sure about what wiping the dust off our feet might be in modern terms, but it's a bit aggressive, I think. Robin Gamble, a great missionary priest in Bradford, he wrote a book called The Irrelevant Church, which is largely not worth reading because it's just him being angry about stuff. I mean, no, it's quite fun to read, but it has some fantastic purple passages. And my favourite is the beginning of the chapter on welcome. He says, some people cannot stand to be welcomed, having first names pushed at them or being fussed over. They prefer to slip into quietness quietly. They like to be anonymous individuals before God. Such people are a small minority, but they are massively over-catered for in the Church of England. Of course, there are all sorts of straightforward, practical things. And I do love the way, over recent years, the way we welcome people into this building has changed and developed, and the work that Elizabeth and Maureen have done to make that happen, and just the fact that doors open automatically. I think that's good. I think that's good. Of course it is. I just get trapped in them far too much when I'm trying to leave. Yeah. But the quality of our welcome, although of course there's always more to do. But how the worshipping assembly actually does that better. I mean, in my last church again, I was really proud of the welcome. Thought it was fantastic. And sorry, it's a story I've told too often, but Tony, one of our church wardens, used to stand in the porch, which was a measly little porch, which is why he felt it was even more important to stand there and say, welcome to Christchurch, welcome to Christchurch. And he'd say it to me. And Maureen does that now here. She says, Nicholas, welcome to Chelmsford Cathedral. And it makes me feel great. In a sense, it's ridiculous. But no, what a fantastic insight. That sense of belonging and the welcome we offer. I love the fact that we learnt bell ringing from Francis's visit to the Sultan. A great gift that Muslims gave us was the call to prayer. We did it in bell terms, they do it from a minaret. But of course there are deeper issues than simple practical steps. Visitors can still go unnoticed. Indeed, one of the worst Sundays I had at my last church was, it was great, buoyant, everything was marvellous. And somebody came up to me 10 minutes after the service and said, great welcome at the door, fantastic worship and, real feeling of belonging. But I went straight through to the parish centre for coffee and nobody has spoken to me in 10 minutes. So I'm leaving and I'm not coming back. Oh, what fantastic feedback, yeah? We always want feedback from those who didn't stay, because that might help us have a better vision of what is. Because the welcome at the door needs to be matched by the courtesy of the experience. The courtesy the newcomer experiences in worship itself. We were talking about Rochester Cathedral just before the service with the choirmen. And a young lady once in Rochester, not in the cathedral, I hasten to add, went to church for the first time in her life, and recovering from the experience later, actually had the audacity, or in my book, wisdom, to write for the Diocesan magazine the following. You are asking me to change the way I speak, the sort of music I enjoy, the length of time I usually listen to a speaker, the type of people I mix with, my body temperature, the type of chair I sit on, the type of clothes I'm used to seeing people wear, my sense of humour. You expect me to know when to stand, sit and kneel, and the answer to prayers I've never heard before. I am prepared to change. But there was nowhere I could connect any part of my life with that service. Wow. And of course that never happens here. But we need to speak that for ourselves. Our personal experience over decades of church-going in places as diverse as central Paris, seaside Portsmouth, a tiny church in rural Cumbria, and even in Chelmsford, suggests that Christian communities can be really astute in noticing the stranger and responding appropriately, realising that a single person in their 80s might need to know more about the lunch club And the family with a new baby might need to know more about the playgroup and junior church. That may seem blindingly obvious. But me, my wife, and our 3 children, and my 3 children have somehow made it to some kinds of adult church going, know that it's not that obvious when you're the stranger. It's taken my daughter 8 years to settle in a church that she feels at home in Glasgow. That's a very long time for somebody who's actually searching. Welcome's only the first step, both across a spiritual and a physical threshold. What happens next needs to live up to what we've already offered. The journey of faith is ultimately in the Lord's hands. But let's make sure it's a journey well begun, dust on our feet or not. And next time you see a new family of 5 approaching this church dressed inappropriately, well, it might just be us again. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.